What is up, guys? For this video we're going to be modifying the fuel rails on the Dakota again. I have modified them once before because my fuel injectors that I'm running are about 10 to 12 millimeters shorter than the regular Magnum fuel injectors. They work fine, they have the right size O-rings and everything, they're just shorter. I bought them on accident, but I decided to make them fit because then I can use SRT4 injectors and Hemi injectors, which are much easier to come by, for me at least, at junkyards and stuff. What I have in my hands here is a factory fuel rail, and then laying here on the floor is the modified fuel rail that I was running. So before, to modify these, I took brackets off of the returnless style fuel rails off of the later Dakotas or the later Magnums, cut those off as long as possible, cut my brackets as long as possible, welded them together, and they worked. The injectors fit. There were no vacuum leaks from the lower portion where the O-ring seals up to the intake manifold, and the truck ran okay on them. But I've had some weird hesitation on like throttle inputs, especially if it's been idling for a minute, and I believe the injectors are sitting up too high. The injectors are not fully seated to like the little bottom seat in the intake manifold like the factory ones did, and I believe a lot of the fuel spraying out of the injector is clinging to the side of the intake manifold. So what I'm going to be doing is taking this fuel rail right here, I'm going to be cutting the brackets in half, and then I'm going to just take the O-ring or the injectors, sit them into the intake manifold all the way down. I'm going to set the fuel rail on top of the injectors, everything sitting where it needs to be. I'm going to take the steel strapping here, cut it to length, and I'm going to weld this to the cut brackets and weld them together. That is the plan. Just an FYI, since this video is about fuel rails and fuel injectors anyway, the earlier Magnum Dakotas, so a 92 and a 93, have the fuel pressure regulator up at the fuel rail like this one. This is what I prefer for my setup because it's just easier to deal with, and the factory fuel pressure regulator is pretty, simple and easy to use, and it's cheaper to use one of these. The returnless fuel rails came on the 94 and later, so the fuel pressure regulator is on top of the fuel pump assembly. It's right on top of the fuel tank. So you only have one line running up to the truck, which is a little bit more complicated to set up a fuel cell for because you have to mess with the rails and do a bunch of stuff. This is a lot easier to deal with if you are running a fuel cell like I am, but you don't have the option of installing an aftermarket regulator with this. But on the returnless rails, it is possible to rig up a fuel pressure regulator, which I have done in the past, but the regulator I had was cheap junk, is eBay stuff. I didn't like it, it didn't work very well, so I ended up just switching back to the stock regulator. I'm just going to get working on this. I'm going to cut these brackets pretty much in the dead center of the straight section here. I'm going to go sit the injectors in, sit the rail in on top of it. Because of how low the injectors sit, I may have issues with the fuel hoses up here clearing the back of the intake manifold. We'll just kind of have to see how that goes. Alright, I got the fuel rails all done and modified, and I'll just go ahead and show you guys what they look like. So the bracket modifications aren't the prettiest looking thing. If I were to paint them, they would probably look a little bit nicer, but I don't think I'm going to end up painting them. But as you can see, the injectors, if I can get in here, they are sitting all the way down. You could barely see any of the silver. That is completely all the way into that intake manifold, and they're all sitting the same distance inside of the intake as well. Hopefully the fuel will atomize a little bit better and not stick to things as much. I should have a much better throttle response out of it this way, and now the injectors are actually sitting where they're supposed to, so that's kind of nice. The other thing that I got at the junkyard is I got some GM fuel lines off of a Series 2 3800, so it was off of like a Buick Park Avenue or something. I cut the ends off the lines and then took the quick disconnects, and the GM quick disconnects fit right onto the Dodge Dakota fuel rails. So I've got these little plastic things popped onto the rail, and then on my fuel lines I have these guys. So these things, like if you take them out, see, I've got this one just kind of hanging out in here. You can take a lighter and heat up the plastic line and pop it off of this, and then you get this nice barb that you can slide your fuel lines onto and hose clamp it onto, and then you'll have a quick disconnect for disconnecting from the fuel rail. So I no longer need to put a bubble flare on the end of the fuel rail. I just have this really nice quick disconnect. I can pop it off, so everything will seal nice. Everything will look nice. It'll be a lot cleaner. Having the elbows, even though I think I might tweak the inlet on the feet here a little bit, the elbows here will kind of push the fuel lines out and away from this stuff down here, so it'll kind of push it off to where I actually have them kind of going towards anyway. So yeah, the fuel rails are done. I've got my disconnect from the junkyard. I think I'll just come back maybe tomorrow or the day after. I have the fitting for the oil drain line. I don't have time to do it right now, but I do have the fitting to get the drain line on the turbo done. And I also think I'm going to go ahead and mount up the boost controller, because I'm just going to mount it on the engine somewhere. So I might do that and then show you guys that whenever I get back to this, whether it be tomorrow or the day after. I will see you guys in a little bit. Okay, I didn't think I was going to be doing that this video, but things kind of worked out and I did it. So that was a lot of work getting this thing in. The transmission isn't butted all the way up to the back of the block yet. I'm going to see if I can get two or at least a couple of the bolts, bell housing bolts in, just to kind of hold things together, and I might go in there and push the clutch pedal to kind of get the transmission to center itself and go together. But that wasn't too bad, and the exhaust fits pretty well. I've got maybe half an inch between the exhaust and the frame rail on this side, but the engine's not going to be moving that much anymore anyway, so. And I'll just kind of get everything situated so the engine's bolted in, and it's bolted up to the transmission, and I can push the clutch pedal again. And then I will show you guys some of the stuff that I did off camera. I also broke something putting the engine back in. Not the end of the world, is not something important. Could have been a lot worse if it broke in a different spot, but it's just the oil feed here. I'll show you guys that in a second. It's the little T-fitting. But I'm going to finish bolting this up, and then I will show you guys what it all looks like put back in the truck. Alright, I am tired and I'm hungry, but I was able to get this engine installed back into the truck, and everything fits perfectly and it looks amazing. So here it is. I got the radiator in here, so my biggest concern was the clearance between the radiator and everything, but if I sit it up where it's going to sit, we got a pretty good amount of room. The wastegate is the closest thing there, and I don't think the radiator fans are going to be touching it. I don't feel like putting them on right now because they're a pain in the butt to pull back off, but we've got plenty of room for the radiator here, and I'll pull this radiator out and set it down. Alright, so we've got plenty of room between the exhaust and the sway bar. If I can get you guys down here. I was kind of worried about this. We're upside down, but here you go. You can see the sway bar and the pipe down there. And we've got room between it and the radiator. We're very close right here between the exhaust and the frame rail, but it doesn't touch. And the solid motor mounts will keep it from being able to move far enough to come anywhere near that. So I got the motor mounts bolted up. The bell housing bolts are bolted back up. I've already removed this broken, actually the T itself didn't break, but one of the little female, or the two male-to-male adapters broke. And thankfully it's got a 10mm head way down inside of here somewhere. Right there, you can kind of see it off to the left. So I should be able to pull that. I've got another T, and I think I have another one of those around. If I don't, I can order one. The clutch pedal feels fine. That's hard to say. I've gone in there and pressed it a couple times. It feels good. The shifter still feels good. Everything is kind of slid back together the way it was supposed to. Again, I didn't think I was going to have this done. So the things that I did yesterday was, for one thing, I painted the fuel rails black because they just looked bad. I got the O2 sensor bung in right there, and then I got the drain fitting done, and it is right there. I got the new 90, and it clears all of the exhaust very well. It's a very smooth drop from the turbo all the way down. It looks very nice and tidy. So I've just got to get the new T on there, and that'll be all back together. I have to hook up a boost controller, and let me get my phone out. I've got a whole list of stuff. So there's the oil feed. There is the boost controller that I need to install, and then, oh, let me get this thing open. So I gotta do the coolant overflow. So I have a expansion tank off of a Volvo that's the same size basically as the GM ones, the GM expansion tanks, but it's not as ugly as the GM expansion tanks, and it bolts in a lot nicer. So I'm gonna be running that with this radiator, because this radiator has a little port inlet on it for the overflow container slash expansion tank. Also, this radiator, since it's from this V6, the inlet to the water pump sits further down, so the radiator will actually be a little bit more efficient, and it's got a larger inlet opening on it than the other one did. Now, my original radiator hose should work, except I've got a turbo blocking where the radiator hose would go, so that could be a slight issue. But anyway, overflow container, fan control. So the ECU, I'm going to try to wire up to turn the fans on and off so I can set a specific temperature. They come on earlier than I would like because it's a 180 degree temperature switch, and the thermostat's right at 180 degrees, so that thing doesn't run very long at temperature before the fans come on, and it's kind of annoying. So I'm going to try and do that, hopefully be able to get it. The Mega Squirt should be able to do it. I've just got to go through the wire harness where I've got it all taped up and hidden. There's a wire in there, I can't remember which one. I got to pull it out. And I think it's the spark output wire is the one that's able to do it, since I'm not using it, or it might be one of the ignition coil ones. But either way, pull that out and run that to the fan, so that's controlling it. That'll eliminate the little sensor thing on the hose. Things will look a little bit nicer up here. And then I want to change the transmission fluid. It's been in there for a year. It's just some Synchro Mesh cheap stuff that I bought at O'Reilly. I want to put some Pennzoil in it, but I've got a couple containers of Valvoline that I haven't used yet, so I'm going to put them in. Maybe next year I'll change it and put some Pennzoil stuff or some GM, one of the two, inside of it. Vacuum lines. So I removed all the vacuum lines. Since I'm moving stuff, relocating stuff, everything's in a different spot. I pulled them all out of the truck. When you're running them all new, I've got some 1/4 inch line that I bought for the boost controller and stuff, and a couple other things. Radiator and heater hoses. So the one heater hose that runs from up here by the thermostat housing right there, that hose will be exactly the same. The one that used to run back into the inlet on the water pump down there now runs from the turbo down, so it's gonna, instead of running down there, it's gonna run from there up here to the turbo. So I'm gonna need to get a longer hose to make that happen. And then as far as radiator hoses, the upper radiator hose will be similar, but I might have to do a little bit of stuff to kind of get it to reach its way around the turbocharger so that I can get it, up to the radiator, but that won't be a big deal. The lower radiator hose is going to be interesting. I think I want to make some adapters out of exhaust pipe to get that working. It should be a much better setup than it was before, because before, the hose I was using was a tiny bit too big for the inlet on the, or the outlet on the radiator into the water pump, so it would periodically spring a leak and I'd have to retighten it. It was a pain in the butt. And then the final two things are exhaust system. This truck is getting a full exhaust again. It's going to be running out the bed exit hole that is already on the truck. You guys will probably remember that. Initially, I'm just going to straight pipe it and run just plain old 2.5 inch pipe all the way back. As you can see, we've got the pipe right here. All I got to do is run a 90 out through that hole, over the trans cross member, and straight back out the hole in the side of the bed right there. So I'll be doing that. And then for the intercooler, I'll just be using the piping from the kit that I bought last year or 2 years ago. Holy crap, it's been a while. Be using that pipe, but I'm going to be getting a bigger intercooler. I don't know if I might bolt the current intercooler back on just because I've got everything ready to go for that one pretty much. But everything's going to be in a different position anyway, because the inlet to the throttle body, the cold side, is going to be coming from this way, and around instead of coming from this side, because the turbo is on this side, so it's going to make more sense to run it that way. And then there's all this other stuff here, so everything's going to be kind of flipped, but I've got plenty of pipe. I should be able to get that done, no problem. But I am going to be getting a bigger intercooler at some point, much bigger. I'm going to definitely be getting it before I do the dyno tune, but I might wait until after I've got everything running just to make things easier, since like I said, I've already got that intercooler. I might as well bolt it up and use it for now, and it's not hard to swap out an intercooler on this thing because of how I've got the front end set up. So I think that's all that's left to do. This truck has turned around pretty fast. Oh, one other thing I do want to do is I want to install a catch can and get rid of these two gold colored breather things here and install a catch can. I think I'm going to convert that old coolant overflow container that was here into a catch can, mount it somewhere in here. I'm going to get some elbows that plug into the valve covers and run it over to that just so it's venting to atmosphere, but it should flow better than these two things and it shouldn't stink quite as bad. But that is it. That is all that is left to do on this thing. This is going to be interesting trying to get this to this outlet flange deal, but I did figure out that those wastegate flanges fit the turbocharger on the outlet right there, so I can run use one of those to make an adapter to go to the 2.5 to 2.5 inch coupler that I bought, and then I can run that to the intercooler and I should be all set. But that won't be too bad. So we're almost there. The truck is almost ready to be running again. I might have it running this weekend. My goal, at least, is to get it running this weekend, get everything hooked back up, get the radiator stuff done, get all the wiring plugged back in, and run the new vacuum lines, just so I can at least fire it and heat cycle it once. I don't think I'll have it driving yet. There's a bunch of snow on the ground and it's cold out anyway. I'm probably going to wait till next weekend to try and drive it. But yeah, guys, I am excited about this thing. I am so excited to hear what it sounds like, to feel how much faster it is at the same boost with this much better exhaust setup. And I'm just ready to drive it again. I've missed driving it. I've got the new car, which you guys saw in a video a while back. I still haven't done an actual reveal video. But even with that new car that I bought, I'm still more excited to drive this thing than I am that one, which is kind of sad, but I guess it's a good thing, I guess. I like my beaters. I like my turbocharged, crappy, rusty thing. So that's going to be the end of the video, guys. I'll give you all one last look of this engine back in the truck with the new exhaust system. Also, the turbo will clear the hood just barely, so we'll be all set there. But this just looks so good in here. I am so happy about this. This has been long overdue. That's going to be the end of the video, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.